Hey everyone, welcome to the podcast. My name is Jeffrey and I'll be your host. Today we are discussing several myths that guests ask or say during a tour at the Stephenson House. Now before I get started and dive into all of the different myths, I want to talk about where our research for the myths comes from. Death by Petticoat is one of our main sources for myths debunked. Mary Miley Theobald is the author, and she was on the project with Colonial Williamsburg. The Daughters of the American Revolution also did some of the research to debunk these myths. So today we're only going to go through 5 myths, but these are very common myths that we get asked or someone says during a tour, as I already stated. So the first myth that I've talked about this one previously in our kitchen podcast, but the myth is people built detached kitchens to prevent them from burning down. Now this myth, as I've stated before, is nonsense, especially at our site, because when the Stephensons first built their kitchen, it was attached on the back part of their main house. Where people start to see more detached kitchen spaces is from the south, because the south had hotter weather, and they also had them built to prevent them from getting that heat from the hot weather and their kitchen into the main house. And people built detached spaces to prevent bugs from getting into the main house, because we didn't have screens yet, so bugs, whenever we cook, they are abundant. Another reason why this myth is nonsense is because most of the roofs at the Stephenson House are made out of Sierra Shake shingles, and when a Sierra Shake shingle catches on fire, they burn really fast. If there was even a slight breeze and the kitchen caught fire, it would quickly spread to the rest of the buildings, especially the main house where our kitchen is located now. So there's no big reason why that they would have a detached space to prevent it from burning down, and their main house, because of the material that they use to build their kitchen and where the kitchen is located at the Stephenson House. A second myth that we hear quite often on our tours are the closet taxes. This myth stems from closets being counted as an extra room if someone could stand in it. From the research project done, the original 13 colonies did not have any closet taxes. And with our house, it's a federal style house, so closets were very prevalent during this time frame, and you'll see closets on both sides of a fireplace. So since the Stephenson House is a federal style home, they wanted to match on both sides. So in our master bedroom and our children's bedroom, we do have the closets on both sides of the fireplace. Most of the closets were used for linens and blankets. We didn't really hang or put a lot of clothing in the closets during this time frame. Some clothes could be hung on hooks, but most of the clothes would be used in dressers or trunks. For other homes that kind of look like ours that have a closet space, one is the Sappington House, and that's in the St. Louis area, and it's located in Crestwood. If you were to visit their house as well, you would see that the closets are on both sides. It is a federal style house as well. It was built in 1806 or 1809. I'm not too sure which year. It's one of those two, but I can't remember which one it is. But they'll have the same style closets, and our closets have a top and a bottom because the myth stemmed further where that they put a divider in so people can no longer stand in their closet, so then they wouldn't be taxed. But the bottom half of the closet was used for storage as well. Clothing, as I said, wasn't really used in New York closets during the federal period. A third myth that I hear on almost every single tour is that people were shorter back then. And this myth has been around forever, I feel like. And up until about 50 years ago, people averaged about the same height as we do now. The average height of a man in the 1800s was about 5'7". Up until really recently, the average height of a man was about 5'8". And now we're up to about 5'9" and 5'10" now. So it's really not even that big of a jump to go from 5'7" to 5'10". But people were obviously taller than 5'7", and they were shorter than 5'7" during the 1800s. We see people like Washington, who was breaching 6 foot, and Lincoln was also around 6 foot. But then we have men like James Madison, who was on the shorter side. I believe he was like 5'5". And then, of course, Napoleon is about 5'5", 5'6". He's not as short as people would say he is. They use that as propaganda, but he was on the shorter side of the average height of a man. But that's the same as we have it now. Heights differ when we have a 7-foot basketball player, and then you might have your average Joe who may only be 5'9", 5'8". So the variations of height is not all that different than what we have now. People just use it as exaggerations. But we usually see that myth at our site when we take guests up to the servants section, because the stairs are a little bit narrow, because they always say people were shorter so they had smaller feet. But that's not the case for our servants section. Only the servants use those stairs. The main family is not going to use them. So they were meant to be tucked away in a corner and hidden from other people. That's the main reason why our stairs are shorter in the servants section. A fourth myth that we hear quite often is people didn't bathe back then, or they only bathed once a year. This myth is also nonsense, because people weren't gross like we think they were. They may have bathed less often, but they definitely bathed more than once a year. Most people wash daily, and they'll wash their face and their hands almost every day. A full-on bath probably didn't happen every day, but it probably happened every 2 weeks or about twice a month. And in today's society, bathing habits vary person to person. It was the same in the 1800s as well. Women did wash their hair less often in the 1800s because it took a little longer for their hair to dry. That's why we see women use day caps and hats to prevent their hair from getting as dirty. And then some women would also braid their hair to prevent dirtiness and grime getting in their hair as often. You'll see in photos of the Stephenson House that all women are either wearing a day cap, hat, and then some of our younger docents, those girls will have their hair braided or in buns. But bathing wise, they practice it like most people do now. For some folks, they may not bathe every day now, but they'll bathe, once or twice a week, maybe 3 times. If you're an athlete, you may shower or bathe 2 or 3 times every day. So it just depends on your own person, really. Our final myth for this podcast, and it goes along with our bathing myth, is don't throw your baby out with the bath water. This saying has made its way into historic sites, and we'll see this myth or saying said more from our older visitors, because a lot of our younger ones don't even know what that means. But people take this saying literally when it was really meant just as a figurative meaning, and it was just kind of a personable saying. And what it really meant was don't throw out something valuable. And so they turned that saying into an actual literal meaning, and then they've kind of changed how that was shaped over time, and that's how we get to this myth. And again, this myth seems nonsense, because if women use tubs to wash their children and infants, they would not cover the infant fully with water. They would only put a few inches of water in the actual tub. And obviously, a mother would be able to see her child in the tub if they only put a few inches of water in there. Also, if a mother did fill the entire tub with water, the infant would drown or before ever being thrown out. Because if you were to look at our tub at the Stephenson House, it goes about, I would say, 2 feet up. And if they were to cover the whole basin with water and stick a child that's younger than 1 year old, they would definitely drown in that water. And mothers are not stupid. They would not throw out their child. I mean, if I was bathing my child, I would obviously be aware if that child was still in the bathtub. And where people kind of try and play the devil's advocate is that since water was a necessity, people wouldn't change out the bath water after every person. So they say that since the water was so dirty, they actually wouldn't be able to see if the child was still in the bathtub, which is false. I mean, yes, it's true that you wouldn't change out the bathwater for a smaller family, but you would also have someone designated, either a mother or a servant, to wash an infant child. So you would always have someone around that child to actually know if it was still in the bathtub or if it wasn't. And if you had a larger family, you would probably change out the bath water probably twice. But obviously the infant was probably one of the last to actually go. But you would obviously know if there was something still in the bathtub. One, it was still heavy. Two, you would have someone who was keeping watch. So there's no reason why ever a child would ever be thrown out with dirty bath water. Well, that is our last myth for the podcast. I hope you enjoyed these 5 myths that are commonly told at historic sites and museums. If you're interested in Death by Petticoat and learning about more myths than just these 5, the information to Theobald's book will be in the description of our podcast. I hope you all have a great day and are staying safe in quarantine, and we'll see you all next time.